Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to today's Partner Web Conference, where we'll be covering Dynamics 365 for Field Service, where we'll be covering what's new for field service, mobile, and technician productivity. And joining us today is Dave Clark and Eamon O'Brien, who are both program managers here at Microsoft. So without further delay, I'd like to hand the floor over to Dave Clark.
So, hey everyone, I'm Dave Clark, and I lead technical readiness for field service, universal resource scheduling, and connected field service.
My name's Eamon O'Brien, and I am a program manager on the product team, owning the technician productivity area. So that encompasses field service mobile and all of our initiatives around making technicians more productive with things like mixed reality and so on.
Exactly. So today we're going to talk about what's new for field service mobile and technician productivity. And this will include everything that's part of the spring 2019 release. And that's both things that are released and soon to be released. And we'll be going over a few important notes, and then Eamon will actually be showing a demo of some of these features. So please post your questions in the chat. And at the end of the call, we'll go through all of them and make sure that we answer them. So some of the features you'll see are not quite released yet, and some things are actually subject to change. So just please keep that in mind as we go through this. So before we jump into the actual features that will be released in spring 2019, let's talk a little bit about the larger trends that are influencing our release. So the first one is deep linking. So understanding that many of our customers' field technicians need to use multiple apps on their phones and tablets to complete their on-site work, deep linking will allow them to select a trigger, let's say within the field service mobile app, and that will bring them to another app and will pass along contextual information. So imagine a simple example would be, I'm a field technician, I'm in field service mobile, I select a service task, and this may trigger a Power App, or it may trigger Outlook to open. It doesn't necessarily need to be a Microsoft app. It could be pretty much anything. Another trend is bring your own device. So many organizations are actually investing less in hardware, and they're having their field technicians bring their personal devices to work. So this means IT departments are using mobile device management tools. And our strategy is we want to make sure that field service mobile works with products like Microsoft Intune. And then lastly, we have mixed reality. So if you're like me and you read Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh, you'll see that Satya Nadella talks about 3 long-term future investments for Microsoft. First one being AI, second one being quantum computing, and then the third one is actually mixed reality. So an example of this is the HoloLens product. And from the field service perspective, we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on the billions and billions of dollars that Microsoft is investing in this, and especially as it relates to technician productivity. So with those trends in mind, today we want to talk about the new field service mobile app, or the new version of the field service mobile app, which is 11.3. We want to talk about updates to technician productivity, and then we'll take a look at some things that are in development. So before we go forward, let's talk about some of the important things that have changed even before this spring release. So the latest mobile app is called Field Service Mobile. The latest release that will be released is 11.3. And if you're on field service version 7.5.5 or 8.2 later, this is the mobile app you'll be using, and you can see the icon on the left there. Now, if you have existing customers who have been around a while, some of them may be using the older app, which is called Field Service Mobile 2017. And if they upgrade to the latest version, they'll actually need to use a new mobile app. It's been around for quite some time now, but just want to make sure that we're all aware of this. When you're using the latest mobile app, this makes some changes to the mobile project, which controls all the customizations. So the way it works is you need to download the latest mobile project. We have a link here, and this deck will be shared after the call. You're going to import this mobile project into the Field Service Mobile Configurator tool. This used to be called Woodford. And you're going to name it the file name, which is really typically just the version name of this mobile project. Then what you're going to do is you're going to derive that mobile project. This is different from cloning it, which a lot of us are used to. You're going to add your mobile configurations to the derivative, and then you're going to publish. There are a lot of reasons why this is useful, but one reason is that it'll allow us to upgrade your mobile projects as Eamon and his team come out with more mobile customizations.
And just one thing quickly, David, if I may, on this point. Why we have this whole structure of you importing our project and then you deriving and putting all your customizations in the derivative project is so that when we rev our project and we put out new versions and so on as new features come in, you'll be able to import the newer version of our project, and that'll update the root or the parent project. And so you can receive updates that we continue to put out for the parent project. But there's some nuances there that we'll have covered in documentation around if in your derivative project you're touching, say, a form, for example, that we push an update to, your child project will not inherit that from the updated parent. So lots of nuances around that, but we'll make sure we have all that covered in documentation so you're able to uptake new features and whatnot that we push out.
Perfect. So, like we mentioned, Field Service is trying to capitalize on the mixed reality investments that Microsoft is making. And Eamon's going to explore this a little bit further, but I want to make sure that we're all clear what we talk about when we talk about mixed reality and then the related apps. So mixed reality is a concept, right? It's when you're interacting with digital information, when you're interacting with digital information that's overlaid on your field of vision. So for the Field Service example, it's using HoloLens or the Field Service mobile app, and what it's going to do is display details on top of assets that you're looking at. And this is slightly different from virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, Microsoft also has a product called Remote Assist, and this is basically just voice and video calling on the HoloLens to help people troubleshoot issues in context. So imagine one person on site with the HoloLens and another person, let's say in a back office. They could share over voice and video calling what they're looking at and collaborate with each other. And then there's also a third product called Guides. And this is a HoloLens only mixed reality app. And this will display step-by-step instructions that guide people through different work. So one Field Service example could be, I select a work order service task, and it'll trigger a guide on my HoloLens for further information or for further steps.
And so what you'll continue to see from a product perspective is, as the product team, we're working very closely with our friends over in the mixed reality product group. As they're putting out new innovations and so on, we always look at those new features, products, and so on through the lens of how could these work in the field service area if there is in fact a fit. So we've already done that with Remote Assist. We'll talk through some of that today. And then Guides, because it's a newer initiative, that's also something we're looking at and targeting for the October wave. So yeah, just as you see mixed reality features and functionalities coming out in the agnostic sense, we'll be trying to take that technology and package it up in a field service, from a field service perspective.
And lastly, you're going to hear Eamon talk about things like mobile device management and mobile application management. And what mobile device management is imagine my organization wants to manage my employees' devices. So as an example, Microsoft manages my mobile device, and it actually requires that I have a lock code or a PIN code to access my device. That's one example. But you can actually take it a step further, and you can have mobile application management, which means that your company will be managing at the application level what you can and cannot do. An example could be having to enter in a PIN to access your corporate email app.
Yeah, and so we see as companies are moving to a BYOD model, bring your own device, they're wanting to leverage things like conditional based access and MAM to be able to ensure that their employees aren't leaking any critical business data. So MAM, as David said, with Intune and others, you can lock down apps, require a PIN to open them up, or other functionalities like prevent copying of data from an app and then pasting into some other application. So this is something similar to our partnership with the mixed reality product team. We're partnering very closely with the Intune team to enlighten our field service mobile app with MAM functionalities for Intune, as that's something we continue hearing as a need from customers, and we totally understand the business value. So yeah, those are things that we're definitely looking at and we'll be aiming to roll out in the coming months.
Excellent. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Eamon, and he's going to share a little bit more details on these new features, and he's going to show us a demo of some of them as well.
Great, thanks, David. So with the April wave, we're launching version 11.3 of our mobile app. So when we first pushed it out, we pushed it out version 11.2 back in around December timeframe. 11.3 will have a host of new features, including things like Azure Blob Storage for node attachments. Right now, the version is not yet live, but we're aiming to get it out just in a matter of weeks. We'll have a link on one of the final slides here that shows you how you can opt in to receive early builds of Field Service Mobile. So we have a beta program where you can sign up and you'll be able to, whether it's on iOS or Android, get access to builds that aren't public yet. And that's a good way to explore what's coming up in the pipeline and so on, and also just give us early feedback. So highly encourage you all to visit that link. It'll be just aka.ms/fsmobile-beta, and we'll have that on one of the later slides. And so in addition to version 11.3 of the app, we also are lighting up IoT functionalities in Field Service Mobile. So as some of you may know, Field Service, we partner very closely with the Azure IoT team. And so we have a story for both IoT Hub and IoT Central, which basically allows for organizations that have instrumented their assets with IoT sensors, and they've hooked those up to Azure. Within Field Service, you're able to basically monitor your assets, and if there's certain IoT alerts that will get triggered based on, say, for example, some asset is overheating or something like that, you can use flow, workflows, and so on to trigger automatic creation of cases or work orders, or even dispatch if you please. So what we've done is we've now lit up the ability to have insights into those IoT entities within Field Service Mobile itself. And for IoT Hub, if you are using IoT Hub, we allow actually for the sending of commands to those devices via Field Service Mobile. So imagine you're a technician out in the field, you show up on site and you're troubleshooting some assets and you want to try something out without necessarily having to get into the guts of the asset on site. If that asset is in fact hooked up to Azure IoT Hub, you can issue a command from the mobile app. And you could even do that, say, if you're on the way to some sites and you want to start even troubleshooting before you get there on site as a technician. You can now do that from the application if your organization is using IoT Hub with Field Service. So lots of cool scenarios that are now lit up as a result of that. And this will be coming available around the same time as when 11.3 goes live. One other thing that'll be coming out with that update is the ability to, if you are using Remote Assist Mobile. So right now, as some of you may know, Remote Assist is the offering that basically handles the scenario where you're some technician, on site, and you need help from some expert because you've hit a snag. Maybe you're a newer employee and you're not very familiar with some particular asset that you're working with. Today folks will, open up FaceTime and call someone, or maybe just kick off a phone call. But Remote Assist from Microsoft allows for organizations to have a business app for that exact use case. So right now, Remote Assist, well, not right now, but before, Remote Assist only had a story on HoloLens, so their application worked on HoloLens, and that was integrated with Field Service. However, now the Remote Assist team has a mobile offering for Android, and so right now it's in public preview. If you go on the the Google Play Store, you can get it downloaded, and we actually have an integration now with Field Service Mobile, wherein if you have Field Service Mobile and you have Remote Assist installed on an Android device, when you go into one of your work orders, if you've set up a remote expert contact for that work order, and you can do this with whatever logic you like, you can key it in to be for certain types of work orders that maybe some resource is best suited to be the expert and whatnot. So if you configure that, when a technician gets on site and opens up a work order, they'll see a Remote Assist button. They can click that, and then it'll deep link into the Remote Assist application and allow for you to kick off a call with that expert. So I'll show some screens of what exactly that looks like in just a few moments. But that's all what you should be expecting to see come available just within the next few weeks, as we're readying for that to all go GA. And then looking forward, we have a number of initiatives we're really keen on. One of those is we keep seeing a lot of customers who want to push the bring your own device model in their organizations. We see the need for MAM capabilities for Field Service Mobile, so mobile application management. And so we're looking to, we're working very closely right now with the Intune team to basically align Field Service Mobile to have any of the MAM capabilities that Intune provides. So that's things like requiring a PIN to access Field Service Mobile. That's like not allowing for copying and pasting of data from Field Service Mobile to other applications. The list goes on and on. Some others, for example, allowing for via Intune to erase the cache of Field Service Mobile. So say if you have some GDPR requirements or something like that, you can make sure that the data in Field Service Mobile is wiped on some specific cadence. So those are capabilities that we're looking to light up in the coming months. Also, right now for our how you configure Field Service Mobile, it's a tool that is not branded Microsoft and whatnot. So what we're doing is we're making it so that we have the Microsoft mobile configuration tool that'll just come naturally with Field Service as opposed to having to install that. So for folks who are familiar, that'll be cleaning up, that'll be making everyone's lives a lot easier. And then one other initiative that we should call out here, and it won't be coming as soon as those investments that we called out right here, likely, but that's something I alluded to earlier, which is guides for Field Service. So the mixed reality team has a guides offering on HoloLens that is basically a 3D guided experience tool. So you're able to author 3D experiences on desktop or even on HoloLens, and then you can really just think of it as a 3D knowledge article, right? And so what we're going to be doing with the October wave is allowing for these 3D guides to be associated with service tasks in Field Service. So that you can say, for some specific incident type, there's these specific service tasks, and for some service tasks, there's an associated 3D guide that'll walk the technician through what they need to do. And of course, that's key for onboarding and ramping up new employees. And what's really valuable is that over the course of the guide, basically their individual steps on the HoloLens, there's a whole tracking mechanism that Guides has to understand how long it's taking a technician per step of the guide. And so that's all data that you're then able to analyze and iterate on as you're authoring your guides, so that you can understand, like, for example, I see my technicians getting stuck on step 2 of the guide. So maybe we need to talk with them and understand how we can make that step a lot easier. So that covers, I think, the most recent developments we've been having going on, and then as well as some things we're looking at going forward. David, could you go to the next slide? Cool. Yeah. So now I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen and walk through some things with regards to Field Service Mobile. And so let me go ahead and take over. Share. Let me know, David, once you can see, and then I will assume everyone else is able to see as well.
I can see Field Service Mobile.
Okay, awesome. So this is, as most of you should know, our Field Service Mobile application is a cross-platform app, so it runs on Windows as well as Android and iOS. Right now, I'm just demoing from Windows because our corporate network here is really locked down, and so using casting technology from phones to computers is always a bit difficult. And so Field Service Mobile is the dedicated mobile application for field service technicians. It provides access to anything that you would like for your technicians to have access to. And for folks who are new in the room, I'll just quickly show what that exactly means from a configuration perspective. So here we are in the Field Service Mobile configurator, and in the configurator, you'll see a list of all of your projects you have. And so a project basically just defines what should the mobile application look like, how should it work, what entities and so on should the user have access to. And so here, for example, is some it's a root project. It's actually the project I was using at the Microsoft Business Application Summit just the other week, and I've imported our Field Service Mobile project, and then I've gone ahead and clicked on derive and then created a derivative of that so that I could put my customizations into this derivative. And so this speaks to the point that David was making, that when you import our project, you do not want to touch that parent project. You just want to derive from it and then make your customizations in the derivative. And this will be really important when we start shipping updates to our project, so that you can go ahead and click import, select our new project, overwrite the parent, and then you'll get the updates in the parent, and you can basically choose what you want to inherit into the child if you've overridden any of those changes. And so I know this is probably really technical for folks on the phone who are more on the functional business side. So I'll try not to go too deep into the weeds, but I just want to very quickly give an overview of the critical functionalities of the configuration experience. So if we go into the derivative, we'll see in here, for example, on the home screen, we've defined, what do we want the users to have access to. So here you'll see this aligns with exactly what we're seeing in the mobile app, right? So you'll see here the dashboard, the accounts, contacts, bookable resource bookings, and so on. And so it's just really important to keep in mind how this all works, and just the powerful nature of all the configuration, frankly. So I'll now just hop back into the app and walk through a steel thread scenario. So, as a technician, I'll generally open up my app, go into my bookings, understand my work for the day. Here we see I've got a work order with the city of Seattle. You can see the address really easily. And then if you open this up, you'll have access to all of the data relevant for that work order. So you'll have things like the address, for example. So here you can very easily get directions. If you click this, it'll just open up the directions app. That is the default on your device. So if you're on Android, it'll open up. If you're configured for Google Maps, it'll go to that and so on, and kick you off into directions mode. You'll also have access to things like the customer asset, for example, that is associated with the work order. And so, for example, here we go in, we see that this work order has to do with some satellite beacon. And then you could even have, 3-dimensional models exported from some CAD programs associated with these customer assets. And if you want to be overly ambitious, you could even provide to your technicians some guided assembly or disassembly, or really just a high fidelity view of that asset. And so this is similar to guides in some regard, but if you want a really really tactile guided experience, guides is the mode for that. But if you want a basic sort of instructional content for the technician, we allow for you to embed 3D content in here. And so ultimately, this is simply a node attachment stored on a 3-dimensional model record. And talking to one of the new features in 11.3 is that these files, these 3D files, can even be stored in Azure Blob Storage now. And then you can actually sync them offline and use them in Field Service Mobile. In this case, I'm just using a node attachment, but if you've configured your org for Azure Blob Storage, then you could have all these files actually in your organization stored in Azure Blob Storage. And why that's important, of course, is multiple reasons, one of them being that storage in Azure is actually much cheaper than storage in CRM. And it's much more scalable, and so on. So beyond viewing customer assets on your work orders and getting your directions, you have all the traditional features you'd expect from field service. You can get access to your service task, you can collect a customer signature, and so on. So one thing now that'll be new with 11.3 of Field Service Mobile is when the technician goes to their list of commands here, and if you've defined a support contact, so here you'll see we've put support contact Eamon O'Brien, and this is just basically saying for this work order, if you hit a snag and you need assistance, you can contact Eamon. So if you are on Android, and remember we're on Windows right now, when you go to your commands, you will see in here Remote Assist. And when you click that, you will get deep linked in to Remote Assist, and a call will be able to be kicked off with Eamon. So because I'm demoing on Windows, I'll just quickly show what it looks like. So imagine we had Remote Assist here, we click that. Then on your Android device, another app would open, the Remote Assist mobile app, and it would take you to this exact page. Now, what's happening here is really just the deep link, right? So we have code here that when you click Remote Assist, we kick off a deep link and we pass a parameter to Remote Assist. That parameter is the identification of this support contact. So then Remote Assist Mobile is able to understand, okay, I need to open up a form to start a call with Eamon O'Brien. And so what the technician is able to then do is simply click Launch Call, and then that'll kick off a Remote Assist call on mobile for the tech. And what that looks like, again, just because this is a bit complicated to demo over a web conference, is you're able to start having a session with someone who's on a desktop PC, who's the expert who can start pointing out things to you in your field of vision on mobile. And so here you'll see the mobile view of what that exactly looks like. And then we're just switching between the expert and the technician's view. But both the expert and the person on the mobile phone are able to annotate what they're seeing to try to help troubleshoot and resolve any issues that the technician is having. And so from a roadmap perspective, in terms of what we're targeting to enhance this functionality, is being able to have all of these remote assist sessions actually recorded and then saved in either Azure Blob Storage or Dynamics, so that when you go to review a work order that has been completed, you're able to see all the activities, all the mixed reality activities that took place. So you, for example, could see that, oh, the technician reached out to Eamon. They had a call that was, 15 minutes long. Here's a recording of that whole session. And one thing we see a lot of customers get really excited about this is that you're basically generating knowledge content on the fly, right? So when you have when you need to ramp someone up and train someone, you can say, show me all the work orders of this incident type that have mixed reality remote assist sessions, and then grab all of the videos from that set. And then you could basically say to newer employees, or even if you're just an employee out in the field who needs help on something, you can review pre-existing sessions for that repair. And so we see folks get really excited about this just because there's a wealth of opportunities once we start getting these recorded in Dynamics with videos. Because what happens today, right, is that you have folks who are just ad hoc using things like FaceTime, WhatsApp, or even just phone calls to get assistance, and none of that data is getting logged in the system to be able to be used by the business. And so what we're pushing with this initiative, this partnership with Remote Assist, is allowing for organizations to start getting all this stuff out in the field documented that before would just be happening in an ad hoc fashion. And then speaking to another future, mixed reality integration we're going to be having with the guides team is when you go into Field Service Mobile and you see some service task. Let's imagine that this inspection for this work order has it needs to have some guided experience because it's really hands-on and so on, or maybe it's a new employee and you want to ramp them up on how to perform the inspection. What you can do, and we'll have this lit up in the October wave, is they get to this service task, so they see that there's a guide associated with it. They can put on their HoloLens and they'll see a list of all their guides for the day. So if one of their work orders has some guide associated with it, they'll see, okay, I have an inspection service task for this work order and it has a guide. I can click on that guide on my HoloLens and then get kicked off into that guided experience. And so here, for example, I can show, and again, this is just very hard to demo via a web conference, but here's, for example, what you would see from a guide's perspective. So you would see in a heads up, hands-free manner, instructions, and you could even have specific 3D content overlaid atop specific models so that it walks you through all the nuances of where you need to be putting your hands on some specific part. And so you're able to author these both on HoloLens, and then you can also make modifications on desktop, publish these out, and then give access to them in your workforce. And from a field service perspective, will allow for you to associate these with service tasks out of the box, so that you can get your technicians to start leveraging this technology. Now, of course, one thing that's different here from with regards to guides in comparison with Remote Assist is that we don't have a mobile story for guides today, but that is something that we're very much interested in exploring, and we're talking with the guides team about that. Because one thing you'll see from a Microsoft perspective all up is that mixed reality, there's just limitless opportunities when you start pairing mixed reality technology with business use cases. But of course, the limiting factor here is that not everyone is using a head-mounted display today. HoloLenses are, we have a V2 now out of HoloLens, the head-mounted display technology from Microsoft. But there is a higher price point than a typical mobile device, and everyone today basically has a mobile device. So from a Microsoft perspective, what we're really looking at is how can we start bringing mixed reality technologies to the mobile device, because that's really where everyone is today. So how can we meet customers where they are as opposed to where they will be in the future? And so that's something you can also expect to start seeing from a Microsoft perspective. So beyond guides and remote assists, that covers our sort of mixed reality investments that we have going on. One thing now that I'll show that we see a lot of customers really excited about, just because of the nature of how their businesses work. So most complex enterprises will have their technicians using a host of mobile apps. They'll have Field Service Mobile. They'll maybe have some Power Apps for specific use cases around things like part searching or inventory, or maybe even just wanting to have them use some Azure Cognitive Service. Maybe they've kicked up a custom app for that, or a Power App. So one thing that we like really proselytizing is that you can very easily deep link out to your other apps that you have, and you can deep link back to Field Service Mobile very easily. So like we showed with Remote Assist, we deep linked into the Remote Assist application. You can also just deep link into a Power App very easily. So here, for example, on the home screen of Field Service Mobile, we've added a node that says inspections, and this is just for demo purposes. And if we go into the configurator, we'll see here, here we've added an inspections node, and so that's what you see right here. And when you click that, is we deep link into Power Apps, and we actually deep link into a specific Power App. So what we deep link into is just a sample Power App that Power Apps has for inspections. And so you'll see in here, you got site inspections, so you can go into one of these and perform some action. And then when you're done, you can very easily just hop back into the Field Service Mobile app. So let's imagine that Field Service Mobile is actually closed, and if we just click on FSM here, we'll see that FSM gets brought right up and you're right back in the context of field service mobile. Now, if you were on a mobile device, basically if you clicked FSM, you would see FSM pop up right on your screen. The experience is just a bit different on desktop. And what you can, of course, also do is if you wanted to, say you went into one of these inspections and you wanted to maybe open up this specific account in Field Service Mobile, you could deep link into that specific record if you wanted to do that. And you can also pass back data from some other app into Field Service Mobile. So that's one thing that we see some organizations really keen on, is that you have some data that you gather in another application. Maybe it's like an IoT device or a device reader, and you read some device data that you want to transfer back to field service. You can do that, and field service can intercept that. And that's something that we'll be publishing out documentation on in terms of how you can handle those scenarios. And so that's deep linking for Power Apps, and I can just very quickly show just how easy that is. So here, we added a node that invokes some offline HTML file. So here we see deeplink.html. So if we go into our HTML files and we go into the deep link folder, we'll see that here's deep link HTML, and all this file does really is it calls out to this JavaScript file. And so if you go into the deep link loader, you'll see there's just one simple function here, and that's saying that on load, basically, when the HTML file is loaded up, this JavaScript function will get invoked. And so all this says is open URL, and then it invokes the schematic name for Power Apps, which is just ms-apps, and then we pass the specific GUID of the Power App. And I'll pull up on screen a slide that will be very good for you all to maybe just grab a screenshot of, and you also have the deck after this session, of course, that'll show you how you can achieve this, and also how you can link back into field service. So that covers deep linking, and yeah, I think I can just pull up actually very quickly a slide on that. So here, for example, you'll see, you can add an iframe. Here's how you invoke a deep link, and then how you get the GUID of your Power App is you simply go to your Power Apps maker in the web client, and then you can look at the web link and just grab this GUID right here, and then that's all you need to do. Just sub that in there, and then you'll have a deep link to invoke your Power App. And if you ever want to deep link back into Field Service Mobile, you simply do fsmobile : // if you want to go to some specific record, you'll say open the name of the entity, and then the GUID of that entity. And so you'll see that basic schema here. And then how you get the GUID for a specific record, you go into the web client, go to the unified interface, open up a record, and then look at the URL, and you'll see this long, complicated looking thing right here. Just grab the final GUID in that URL, and that's the actual GUID ID for that record. And then you can simply get that going to create a deep link. And of course, like for example, for the remote assist integration, we're not hard coding these deep links, right? We actually have JavaScript that understands who is the remote expert, and then we construct this deep link on the fly. So you're able to do that in Field Service Mobile or even your own custom application, so that you can create dynamic deep links. Cool. So I think, David, those are the key things I wanted to show on my side. So I'll stop sharing. And if you could pull back up the deck, we can just cover the last slide and then get into questions and whatnot.
Excellent. All right, so before we let you guys go, here is a list of probably the most important information for Field Service Mobile. We have things like links to where to get the latest app, right? And whether you're on a Windows, Android, or iOS device. We're going to be releasing a new mobile project template, and here's a link to get that as well. We're investing heavily in documentation, and you can see, for example, we recently came out with a doc called, Field Service Mobile Quick Facts. And this is all the basic information of Field Service Mobile, meaning, what version of iOS is it compatible with, or, what are the main features that customers are interested in, and things like that. Eamon showed viewing a 3D model on the field service mobile app, and we actually have documentation of how to set that up live today. And in the next few months, we're going to be creating documentation or more in-depth documentation for how to deep link to and from other apps, including Power Apps. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions. I see we have a few here.
And just quick thing here, just going through all the URLs, I see that we didn't include here the beta link. I've just posted that in the discussion. And so you'll see if you want to get access to early builds of Field Service Mobile, go to that link, fill out the Microsoft form, and you'll then start getting pre-release builds on your device of choice. Yeah, cool. So questions. What is HoloLens? I see that was one of the first questions we got. So HoloLens is Microsoft's head-mounted display, or HMD device. That when you put it on your, it's a device that you put on your head, as per the term head-mounted display, and it basically runs a forked off version of Windows. So you can run Windows apps on it. You can run, you can simply run Edge browser and so on. And it allows for you to basically have stuff appear in your field of vision in an augmented fashion, and you can actually interact with it. So I highly recommend for any folks who aren't familiar with HoloLens, go on YouTube, just search HoloLens. There's lots of really cool videos showing the power of the technology. In terms of how it helps with FSM, I see that was the next question. Right now, Field Service Mobile, by nature of the fact that it's a Windows app, it actually runs on HoloLens. And so if you have a HoloLens, you can download Field Service Mobile on the Windows Store and actually have Field Service Mobile appear in your field of view. There's actually some cool things you can do with that, where if you have like a 3D model associated with the customer asset, you can actually download that within Field Service Mobile and then pull that 3D model into your actual 3D space. And then, you can also, if you have remote assist on HoloLens or even guides on HoloLens, you can deep link between Field Service Mobile and those apps. So I'd say that's the cool things for Field Service Mobile and HoloLens today. Then we got a question: best way to show cross and upsell scenario? Did it using Field Service Mobile, supplying deep link email for client to recommend product? Yeah, so it looks like there's just some interest in understanding some cross and upsell scenarios with deep links. So David, I think that's just some feedback we can take with regards to documentation and speaking to the power of deep linking.
Right. When we're talking about the upsell and the cross-sell opportunities, from the field technician's perspective, what exactly are we talking about? I guess, Steve gives the example of emailing someone a recommended product. I guess other simple examples would be on the Field Service Mobile, allowing them to create a lead. I guess in your experience, Eamon, are there typical examples that you come across?
Yeah, I think what you called out is the basics of it, is that, you have techs out in the field, they start repairing some asset, and they want to tell the customer, like, hey, if you actually upgraded to this other asset that we see a lot of other customers using, you wouldn't have these issues. And so they're able to start generating revenue from the business out there. And that's something we see organizations in general key on, is turning all of their support agents, whether it be people at contact centers or CSRs or folks out in the field, turning them into actual sellers. So right. Yeah, I'd say that's what we generally see there.
One example I did see from working with a customer is they wanted their field technicians to document anytime they saw a competitive product on site, and then also write down what that competitive product was, and then that was automatically sent to the sales team. And I guess that's very similar to the lead example.
Nice. Cool. Moving on to the next. So how do you create a guide for service tasks? So today, guides right now is in a preview, and we do not allow out of the box. We don't provide the relation between guides and service tasks. That's something that'll be coming out with the October release. But what you can do is, if you opt into the guides preview, just search online for Microsoft Guides preview, and you'll find a link to opt in. You'll be able to get the guide solution installed on your Dynamics organization. And then you'll also be able to install like the guides app on your HoloLens and on your PC so that you can start authoring guides. And you could actually yourself add in schema yourself between the guide entity and service task. So the guide solution on Dynamics will introduce things like the guides entity, and you can relate that to whatever you want. And really that's what we'll be doing from a field service perspective, is providing all that piping out of the box with the October release. Next question, does guides act as a GPS in field service mobile? So I'm not sure exactly the context of that question, if guides has any GPS functionality with it. I imagine the question is, do you log maybe the GPS coordinates when you're completing a guide?
Or, I mean, if I were a field technician driving in the car, I guess, and I was wearing my HoloLens.
Oh, like navigation perhaps.
You think it would do that?
So I mean, if you define a guide to handle that, I think, well, the thing is they don't necessarily have the notion around navigation experiences within guides. It's more you're interacting with some asset in front of you. So I think that'd be good feedback to provide if you opt into the guides program. They have a great channel for providing feedback, and I highly recommend any cool suggestions you have, send their way. They're really keen on that. Next question. Why do we have to derive and import the child project? Can't we do the same at parent level only? So the reason is that, you know, our field service mobile application is for field service. It's not to be used outside of any field service use cases. And you'll see that in our licensing guide, that only Dynamics 365 for field service licensed users performing, you know, typical field service scenarios out in the field, getting assigned bookings and working with customer assets is what our app is supposed to be used for. And so our project provides, you know, a sort of, a sandbox within which you can start customizing. But you have to use our project because there's some important functionalities we include in that that we require for our app to actually function. And so you have to import our project, and then you derive from there, and then you can do whatever you want in your derivative. But you just always have to be working off of our project. And in terms of if you want to start having multi-levels of other projects yourself, you can actually derive off of your derivative. So, you know, it's a whole project hierarchy scheme where you can have, child projects and then grandchildren and so on. So the fact you have to derive from our project does not prevent you from deriving from your own project and having multiple levels of projects. Next question, does Remote Assist app work on other Windows devices such as Surface Go? So Remote Assist, the desktop client for that is literally just Teams. So long as your device can run Teams, you can run Remote Assist from the expert perspective. In terms of the person who's reaching out from help, that Remote Assist only works today from HoloLens and from Android. But iOS is, of course, on the roadmap. And if you want to give feedback to the Remote Assist team, I highly recommend you opt in to the Remote Assist app on Android, and you can start telling them, I need iOS today, and just start heckling them about all that. So beyond that, next question. Are there any particular requirements for the Remote Assist contact regarding the contact being a user of some sort? Very good question. So right now, Remote Assist only works with internal folks who are also on your same Azure Active Directory. So there isn't a notion of being able to have a remote expert help you who simply is a buddy of yours who doesn't work for your same company. So right now we have the support contact field limited to other bookable resources, but that is something that we've been hearing as feedback, certainly, is that, you know, in cases of outsourced expertise and whatnot, you need to be able to interact across different Azure tenants. But right now it's only other folks on your Azure Active Directory. Next question, would love to hear about how we are doing. Okay, that was Ryan. Next question, where does the video recording get stored in Field Service Mobile? Great question. So today, as I alluded to, we don't yet have those Remote Assist sessions getting recorded, but that is very much on our near-term roadmap, because that's really where the value of Remote Assist starts to pop. And so what you could actually perhaps hack together is, because Remote Assist, the expert view is just in Teams, you could technically be recording your screen for that Teams call on the desktop client. But what we're looking to do is when you've completed a remote assist call, that remote assist recording will get stored in either just some Teams SharePoint or actually logged back into some Azure storage blob. But that we haven't finalized that story yet, but that's something we will be getting to. So the storage story isn't yet final. We're still working on that. Next question, are there plans to move away from RESTCO at some point and use more of the UCI capability? Yeah, so today, as folks are familiar, our field service mobile app is really built atop two frameworks. So it's Xamarin based, so Microsoft's framework for building out cross-platform applications. And we also actually work with a partner of ours, RESTCO, to build out our field service mobile application. Of course, today Microsoft has a wealth of mobile apps in terms of mobile app platforms and whatnot. We've got Power Apps, so you can have Canvas and model-driven apps. And we very much would like to make our mobile ecosystem a lot more straightforward for folks so that, you can simply make model apps and Canvas apps and not have to learn other configuration tools and so on. And so we're certainly working very closely with the platform team to make sure that we can have a really good story in terms of a model app for field service. And so that's something we're working with the platform team on. But today, if you have field service mobile scenarios, the story is, you use field service mobile. And let's see, any other questions for more directed? For more directed next style user interface for bookings that we would deliver via an embedded HTML page, is there a recommended HTML or UI framework? Good question. I don't have any immediate thoughts on that one. Let me just digest to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, that we would deliver via an embedded HTML page. Sorry, good. Okay, yeah, so I think I understand the question. Yeah, so we're saying like a more guided experience for technicians as opposed to sort of, here's the form, here's the list of records, here's the homepage, figure it out. Totally. Yeah, so one thing actually that we see folks who want to get this sort of experience leverage is something like literally a Power App or even a model app where they're using a task-based experience. So it's called TBX. And so if you're looking for an experience very different than what we offer in Field Service Mobile and you want something like that, you could try looking at those functionalities. Or if you'd like to create that custom experience within Field Service Mobile, you could certainly do that. I don't necessarily have any recommended frameworks from a development perspective what to use for that there. Cool. And then I think let's just see, did we have any other questions come in? Looks like I think we covered all of those. So cool, David. Anything I missed? Anything else you'd like to touch on?
No, just if you guys have any more questions after this call, feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat, and I'll work with Eamon to get the answers to you guys.
Yeah, just one other thing, I guess, is, I apologize again for not being able to demo Remote Assist live. It's really complicated doing that on a web conference. But please do check out that YouTube link at the bottom there, and you'll be able to see we presented at Microsoft Business Application Summit just the other week, all those stuff working live. And thankfully, everything actually worked without a hitch because, always demoing this stuff, lots of moving parts. But highly recommend checking that out. And always feel free to reach out, directly to myself or David. You can find us on LinkedIn. Any feedback, thoughts, and so on, we'd love to hear from all of you.
Excellent. Yeah, and of course, the PowerPoint and the recording of the session will be made available to everyone who registered.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, let me pop in here and just mention that we do have a survey that we would love everyone to take a few minutes to go through. I've added that link into the chat window there. I'll put it in one more time just so that we have it. But if you go through and click on that survey link, we really hope you enjoyed today's content and found the information helpful. But we would also like to hear your feedback or suggestions on ways that we can provide you with even better content and other event experiences. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. As Dave mentioned, the attendees will receive a link to this recording via email within about 48 hours. And we just want to note that that usually comes out of our learning mailbox. So if you get that email, you don't see it in 48 hours or so, just go ahead and check your spam filter just to make sure that it didn't get caught up there. At this point, Dave or Eamon, any other parting comments that you'd like to lead with here?
I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. Hopefully this was valuable, and we'd love to hear any feedback you all have. So please opt into the beta, connect with us on LinkedIn, and let us know your thoughts on stuff, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, hey, big thank you today for Dave and Eamon for presenting our content. Ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude our web conference for today. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session.